Alicia, could you give us a determination of a quorum, please?
Councilmember Hogue is present, Councilmember Fennell is present, Councilmember Runenbaum is present, Mayor Moss is present, Councilmember Young is present, Councilmember McCon is present.
Thank you. If you'll rise, Councilman Hogue is going to give the invocation and lead us in the pledge. Thank you.
Gracious Father, we thank you for today, Lord. We thank you just for this week and for the opportunity we have to gather. I pray, Father, that you would just grant us wisdom tonight, Lord, and thank you for the rain that you've sent our way, Father, and just for the replenishment it gives us. Pray and lift up the teachers and the students, Lord, as they get ready to go back to school, that you would just calm nerves and just help them have a great, successful year. And Father, we just give you tonight and ask all these things be done in your Son's name.
Amen.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, we have a couple of public comments. The first one will be Mr. Fred McCulley of 433 Crown Road. And Mr. McCulley, you're up, please. If you'll grab this at this microphone right over here.
All right. I have a little handout here that might be a little redundant, but it's like Mayor, City Council, I appreciate the opportunity to speak and making sure what I consider to be some very important information with our water. I spent quite a bit of time on TCEQ doing research as far as what actually cities, municipalities, and what have you are required to sell water. My 40 plus years of managing companies and part of that being owner, I learned a couple things. If you don't take care of your equipment, if you don't take care of their inventory, it won't take care of you. So with that being said, I've got 5 bullets here. I know I won't be able to get anybody to respond or answer from, but I'd like to go on record as at least getting it off of my chest. So, question number 1, does the city have a documented comprehensive preventive maintenance procedure with audit records? Number 2, who audits the maintenance records and how often is it reviewed? Number 3, does the city comply with the TCEQ Water Conservation Plan, Form TCEQ 10218? If so, cities with 5,000 or more populations have a mandatory written requirement that's specific to populations of that size or larger to have leak detection and repair documents and procedures in place. Fifth is basically a comment, and we have 3 different boards here according to the willowpark.org. We do not have at our size right now a municipal utility board for infrastructure oversight. If we did, this oversight could serve as a review for your record documentation for your maintenance procedure. Maintenance procedures, I believe, if they were followed and written and someone really owned that process, we probably wouldn't have ever got forward. Because we would have known several years ago, which, as I served on the Planning and Zoning Committee, we knew the day I sat down and got chair up there about 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago. The long-range comprehensive plan, it was very, very explicit in 2014, and the one prior to that was 204. The top items: water, roads, and sewer. 2004, look it up on Google. Now you go to 2014, you'll see the same thing. I realize that is not y'all's responsibility all the way. But I believe most people see it, except a couple, have been on the city council and mayor long enough to be past the honeymoon. So I think it's probably, and I realize that things are being done, and it may not be disseminated to the population in ways that everybody kind of understands it or sees it. As I look at the city website, it's outdated, it's antiquated. Nobody's keeping it up to date. It's just not. I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody, but I don't know who to point to, and if I did, I wouldn't. I can tell you one thing about the Raymond, who is our public work director, can't be the sole person responsible to administrate these type duties. He has to have tools in his toolbox to do his job. You write and document what you'd like for this man to do. He can't go do it himself. He'll have to appoint someone to make it happen. You can't just go say, Raymond, when's the last time y'all looked at well number 14? A couple of months ago.
Thank you, Mr. Cully. Your time's up.
Okay,
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Public comment number 2 is Mr. Harold Heish, 79 Crown Road. I didn't tell Ms. Fred you got 3 minutes. I'm sorry.
Well, cut me off. And I also like to thank the mayor and the council for letting me come here and speak. My name is Harold Heiss. I've been a resident here for almost 30 years. So I have seen the water restrictions that we were going through here numerous times, and it seems like there's nothing ever really done about it. It's like most things that happen in Willow Park that I've noticed. It's a lot of lip service and no action on it, you know. So it's time to either, get it or don't. My question is that why could we never had a bond issue to fix the water issues? They've been on for 30 years, as the gentleman here said earlier. This is not something that's new. This has been an ongoing problem since I've been here, and it's never had anything be done to fix it. I would think that it'd be better to have we had a bond issue for the police station. I'm not saying anything against law enforcement, because the gentleman
discussion? All in favor? Four. Any opposed? One opposed. Thank you. Number 3, presentation by Jake Weber of quarterly financial reports. Jake, you're up.
Good evening. So this is going to be through June 30th, so this will give us 9 months of data, and hopefully this will give you a good feel as we project into the end of the year, into the fiscal year, as you're getting your budget approved, that type of thing. And so, as usual, I'll run through this. If you have any questions as I'm going through it or at the end, let me know, and I'll be happy to address those. And just try to highlight some of the main items as I do, as I've done in the past. If you look on that front page with the financial highlights, you can see in all our major funds, we're operating at a surplus for the first 9 months of the year. In your general fund specifically, you're at about $440,000 in the surplus. You would anticipate that to come down in the final 3 months as most of your M&O tax has come in. So you may operate at deficit the last 3 months, but still would anticipate being in a surplus on that fund. Obviously, you see your water and wastewater in surplus as well. And there's nothing really on there that you would expect that to change necessarily. Obviously, with some of the water issues, there'll be some expenditures, but still, in terms of cash flow year to date, you're in a strong position there. So that's just high level, that you can kind of see total revenue, total expense, where we're at for the year, and also as percent of budget there. The capital project tracker, just so you can kind of see there. Just a couple quick things to point out. Public Works building. The additional funding has not been added yet because that had not been funded as of this date, but I believe the $600,000 will get added to that to finish that project. And then on the Ranch House Road, that does include the additional debt that was issued here a couple months ago, just so you can kind of see the remaining left to spend there. Just kind of flipping, I'm going to look on the general fund, page 1, or page 2 overall, the general fund with the revenue section. A couple things I was going to point out. You see your M&O tax, you're at 89% right now of the year. Most likely it's going to come in under budget. We've probably collected most of what we will in that. So just something to note there. On the flip side, the sales tax, we're 77% of budget already, and with the trend the last few months, we'd expect that to end up coming in over budget. So you're going to see an increase in sales tax there. So you kind of see in terms of your budget, you're ahead of budget on most of your revenue items. On your franchise fees, you see we're a little below, but in the water and the wastewater franchise fees, those all get paid in the fourth quarter, so that will catch up. So we're tracking there well. On the development permit fees, you see 171% of budget, so again, showing strong growth in that section. Flipping through, is there any questions on any other line items in the general fund for revenues or expenditures that anybody saw that stuck out to you that we haven't addressed in the past?
One question on the board administration.
Yes.
Line. It was 16,618%.
And that's just because the budget item was $100 in there for whatever reason. Yeah. So if you look at the total dollars, $16,000, but percentage-wise, that's why that looks large. But obviously, dollar-wise, it's not as significant there. So that's just the way that kicks out. Okay, so I'm going to run through that, like I said, on the general fund, if there's not any other questions. Flipping to the water fund, so that's going to be on page 6 of what I have. And so you can kind of see on that, just looking at the revenues, where it's, for the first 9 months, 78% of budget. So obviously you're trending right where you'd want to be with 3 months remaining. With the summer months, and obviously with some of the water restrictions that will come into play. But overall, based on anticipated budget for the first 9 months, you're where you'd expect to be on something like that, which is usually something that you historically can budget. So it kind of just gives you a feel for overall where we are there. Again, we've discussed some of the other stuff in the past, such as impact fees and where we are on those. So there's nothing in the most recent quarter, at least, that has changed based on what we've discussed in the past there. The only other thing I saw on the water fund I was going to address is the last round of debt service payments were made in August, but it was a smaller round, so That's just one other expenditures that's gonna come out. But the majority of those were paid back in February, so if you kind of look at that, we've paid $511,000. Our budget was $635, so you see we have a little bit left to be paid there, but most of that's already been paid out.
We actually paid those this morning.
Gotcha. So yeah, just something to be aware of on that. Wastewater as well, just looking at the line items there. Again, there was nothing that I saw in the most recent quarter that hasn't been addressed previously. And even looking at year to date, we're 74% on your user charges, so right in line with expectations there. Debt service payments have been made on that, so we're good to go there. And you can see we're operating in surplus as well. A couple of things I was going to point out on the bank account balances. So if you look, you can kind of see the cash balances there on that page. If you look on that second item under the water fund, there's that Techstar Water Capital Improvements, and that's at $1.53 million that I know has been discussed for future improvements that I'm sure you guys will get into, but that's has been sitting with the Techstar account that is cash available. And I just want to point that out because I know it's probably been something of discussion. The other thing that's just going to be a new line item under that other funds is that TERS reimbursement fund. So we've started getting some of the tax on that from the TERS area. So there's $36,000 in there, and that will continue to come in, but that's something that we haven't had in the past, and that was a new account that's been set up here in the last few months.
And eventually that TERS count will zero out. That's those are the monies that we are owed to the other party. That's what the presidential is deposited in our account that we will owe the other party.
So overall, you can see still, strong cash position. If you look on the next page, it kind of shows that graph. You can see an overview of committed cash, operating cash, your reserves, that type of thing. So you kind of know what do we have available to spend, what do we have that's committed, and what do we have in a savings or reserve. And then if you look at some of those graphs, the only other thing I was going to show there, obviously you can see on your user charges, those are continuing to trend up just with the growth of the city, as you'd expect that to continue to go that direction. And then also on the sales tax, I know that's probably the most growth area we've seen. And so you can see just historically, over the last few years, we've kind of hovered above 70,000 for the 12-month moving average, and now we're above that. And lately, we've really seen some strong growth in there. I know Ryan had mentioned most recent was 116,000 that was received here in August.
Last week.
Yeah, so you can see that is really starting to ramp up a little bit. And so that's something you'd expect to see future revenue growth in that area. Any questions, anything that was gone over there? Any concerns, anything like that?
Just back of the napkin math, if you take our net income position on all three funds, general, water, wastewater, I've got us with net income of about 1.1
Yep.
and change.
That's about what, yeah. Yep. So,
1.1 million.
which is in line, if you remember last year for the audit report, I think we were around 900 or $1 million, between all your major funds. So, like I said, the city's in a strong financial position right now in terms of how it's been operating. And so that's obviously a good thing.
Any other questions for Jake? Thank you. We need to go back to the consent agenda. I'm sorry. We need to approve the council meetings for the July 10th meeting. Do we have a motion to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the July meeting as presented.
Second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 4, to consider and take action on approval to join TIPS Buying Cooperative. Mr. Grimes.
The TIPS Buying Cooperative is part of a larger project with Enterprise and the fleet management, which would be the next agenda item. This is similar to the Buy Board or the Houston Galveston Association of Governments. It is a way for us to take advantage of their competitive bidding process that they've already undergone, and I would recommend passage. Alicia, there's not a fee for this. There's like a $100 fee or something like that.
I don't think so.
No? Okay. It's like a minimal fee if there is.
Do we have a motion?
make a motion to approve the TIPS buying cooperative agreement. Manager Brad.
Second?
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Item number 5, to consider and take action on approving a fleet lease and maintenance agreement and all other associated agreements with Enterprise for the leasing of vehicles used by the city. Mr. Grimes.
At the moment, I'm going to turn this over to Jennifer Bertram with Enterprise Fleet. Enterprise Fleet approached us a number of months ago about transitioning the city's transportation needs into a fleet management program, whereas we no longer have decaying assets.
Come on up.
That we would have essentially an organization that would manage our program for us. We vetted these people thoroughly. The Chief West denied and Chief Lenore. We also talked to some other groups that do similar work. We were impressed with Enterprise and their professionalism, their detail, and quite frankly, the cost savings that I think we'll be able to see. So, Ms. Bertram, I'll let you give them the particulars.
Mayor and Council, thank you for your time today. We'll go through a brief overview of why cities are partnering with us, and the sustainable replacement plan allows cities to replace vehicles more frequently, lowering the overall total cost of ownership, and some specific numbers today.
You want to just tell me when you're ready?
Yeah, just next slide.
We're working on amending.
So here are some of the areas of opportunity we're going to talk about today. Enterprise Rent-A-Car is our parent company. So, can you see over there? So for most of you, you know the Rent-A-Car division, but we own and operate almost 2 million vehicles today, which makes us the largest purchaser and seller of vehicles in the world. So we take the economies of scale, the infrastructure, and best practices over the last 60 years, and we help municipalities really piggyback on those best practices to lower their total cost of ownership while taking a lot of the administrative burden off of their plate as well. Here's some of the cities, universities that we work with today. We work with government entities across the country, but specifically here in the Metroplex, you might be familiar with Kennedale or Halton City, Waxahachie, Corinth, Commerce just came on board, Terrell, just to name a few. And so while a lot of these organizations, they're different. They have different philosophies on when to replace vehicles. They have different budgets, if you will. They all deal with very similar constraints, if you will. Good. Next slide. They're all dealing with the same, unfunded or underfunded state mandates. Everybody's trying to do more with less. Where do we cut back? And the fleet is an opportunity to lower expense. Another commonality between all of those government entities is, on average, you see that most cities, and this actually came straight from the state page, universities, cities, counties, and school districts run their vehicles for 9 years or longer. Typically, that's because the philosophy is, well, we do such low mileage, so we should run our vehicles much longer. And also, the commonality is, again, for public works and parks, we typically see low mileage between 5,000 to 7,500 miles a year, where PD and fire would do a little bit more than that. And again, another commonality would be that we typically see that multiple departments are going to have multiple budgets or plans. So where, sometimes the emergency response vehicles take priority, and public works might run our vehicles for 20 years longer. And it's typically because here's the capital budget that we have, here's what you get to replace this year. So that's what's dictating the replacement cycle versus here's the lowest cost of ownership and the right time to replace equipment. Here's how we should be matching our capital spending alongside that because it's the best financial decision. So if you look on a micro view of owning and operating just a one unit, you'll notice that depreciation is representative of your acquisition less your resale at the end. It's a good chunk of the total cost. It's about 20 to 30% of your spend. But operating expense makes up more like 60 to 70% of your spend. So if you look at that on a macro view, go back one.
Come back.
Oh, I guess we took that out, sorry. If you look at that on the macro macro view, that really represents the budget exactly. So you'll see that typically the capital budget represents closer to 20 to 30% of the budget versus your operating expense is more like 70% of the budget. And so what happens when we have a year where it's tight, we need to cut back, the first things that cities do typically is we're going to cut capital spending. But what happens when we do that is then our operating expenses start to increase. So if we know our operating budget is the larger bucket, then why don't we just cut that in half? But the problem there is we can't get halfway through the year and then stop fueling and maintaining the vehicles. So how do we impact both budgets? The only way to lower the overall total cost of ownership is by lowering the average age of the fleet. And the only way to do that is to replace vehicles more frequently. So I want to show you an example of how this is possible for cities and why they're taking advantage of this. So this is an example straight from GM's website. This is the 2017 Chevy Silverado. This vehicle retails for $37,000. Government entities have a significant buying power. It's what you're already capitalizing on. So I wish I could go buy a truck for as cheap as the city can. On the state contract, you'll notice that the same exact truck, Willow Park can buy that truck for $24,000, which is $13,000 below what I could purchase that vehicle for me. So that just shows the significance of the buying power you're already taking advantage of. But what cities aren't capitalizing on is what the resale would be had you gotten rid of it at the right time. So this is just some third-party data from Manheim. Just want to show you an example. Thank you. So this example was a sample size of 2015 Chevy Silverados that were sold at auction. The average odometer was 17.5 and average sales price was 22.9. So if that was Willow Park's truck, and again, this is third-party data, you would have bought the vehicle for $24,000 and turned around and sold it in 2 years for $22,900. So it would have only cost you $1,700 in capital to operate that vehicle for 2 years. Similarly, the sample size of 2016s and the average odometer at 19, and because it was a year newer, sold for 26. So if that was your truck, you actually would have made a profit of $1,700. So what most folks don't know about our parent company is that we make more money reselling our vehicles than we do renting them. Now this is the blueprint that we've been running for the past 60 years. Now the difference is that a commercial contractor up the road, that we work with a lot of commercial entities as well, they don't have the same buying power as a government entity. So they can't buy a vehicle, $13,000 below market value. So we're just showing you, again, you have the buying power already, exactly like Enterprise Rent-A-Car. We're buying 100,000 Chevy Silverados at one time. Same thing. If you buy it the right way, you run it for the right amount of time, and you turn around and sell it the right way, again, you can capitalize on that resale. So essentially what that allows us to do, is if we're getting rid of it at the right time, is, again, shorten that depreciation and also lower our operating expense. So if it costs us the same to replace vehicles, approximately 5 years or less, and it therefore lowers our operating expense by doing so, then what are the other things that it impacts? Well, safety is a big factor. It was very interesting to me to learn, because 2007 seems like just yesterday to me, but I didn't realize that prior to 2017 that the analog brakes and front, side crash tests and airbags weren't standard equipment on vehicles. Today, the city operates 7 vehicles that are past 2007. And again, there's some additional safety equipment as technology progresses that the city will be able to take advantage of, again, by having a proactive replacement plan. Some of the equipment in 2012, the electronic stability control is very important, especially on the police vehicles. And then some of the additional equipment that we see that's becoming standard 2017 going forward. 2018, we see reverse backup cameras as standard equipment on everything going forward. So just things like that the city will be able to piggyback on by replacing their vehicles more frequently. So part of our partnership, it's not just a recommendation on replacements in 1 year and that's it. It's an ongoing partnership. So we would continue to provide recommendations. So just like the example I showed you before where the resale value after 2 years or a year made sense for the city to potentially get rid of vehicles sooner, your account team and your account managers here Sure he's glad that I just called him out. We'll be meeting with you all with staff on an annual basis to provide those recommendations. So we're not just looking at which makes and models makes the most sense on an annual basis, but also from a resale perspective, the time of year and who to sell it to, and what's going to be the best financial decision for the city to make. So we will implement a couple of controls that the city will be able to use, and also along with, I think there was a couple citizens that had mentioned just the tracking of different additional expenses and having the records, and that actually goes right along with our maintenance program. So our maintenance program can be used at any local shop, and essentially we would keep the records of every single repair that's done. It's automated, and the dashboard comes along with our partnership. So
Fall asleep on you?
It went to sleep.
oh, that's okay. I'll just keep talking. Okay, so our maintenance program, again, can be used at any local shop. This really is designed to be very easy for the driver because they can continue to go to any local shop and keep the revenue within the local tax base. And then our program essentially would track every single repair, all the routine maintenance, and also if there was any type of routine maintenance that was missed, can send out alerts. It's all automated through our website. So all that technology in the dashboard I'll show you here in a second comes along with our partnership. So that along with fuel program. The field program, again, would be integrated as well. So on the dashboard, staff, and again, each department could have as many users as they wanted, but would have access to all of the data, whether it be operating expense, resale, all of that information, again, just all feeding into our dashboard. So disposal, sorry, to go back one. Resale is the biggest component of the total cost of ownership. While operating expense is definitely going to be lowered by lowering the average age of the fleet, resale and capitalizing on what vehicles would be worth is the most important part. So we have we have learned over 60 years that going to auction doesn't always yield the highest rate of return. So if we did that on our fleet, we made a $100 mistake, would make a $200 million mistake. So we created an internal team that all they do is hand sell our vehicles. So that gives us an opportunity to network your city vehicles to a multitude of different dealers, whether it be major dealers, franchise dealers, note lots, and we all pin them against each other, if you will, but to drive up the sales price through a blind bid process. So what that allows us to do is on average get about 10% over what auction would bring for our clients. And so we would handle the entire process, pick up the vehicle, and then the equity goes back to the city. So this is the dashboard. So this is just part of the technology and the mobile app that comes with the partnership as well. The toolkit, which is represented down below, is our opportunity to help staff analyze on an annual basis which manufacturers make the most sense. So for a half-ton pickup truck, should we be buying Ford this year? Should we be buying Chevy? Which makes the most sense from a total cost of ownership standpoint? Most of the time cities